Good morning. Welcome to episode 112 of the Driller Newscast, a weekly update on the news and stories impacting the construction, the geothermal, the water, and drilling industry. I'm your host, Rocky Yordi, and welcome to half of the year gone. I want you to take a moment, pull out that 2024 plan, see if you're on track. Are you hitting your goals, or is it time to kick it into high gear? Kicking it into high gear always has a lot of X factors involved, including negating safety and getting away from core company policies. So really take a moment, get that gut check, get your people circled around, and see how we can finish the year out right. This week in the news, we're going to talk about water theft in California. For our feature, we're going to stay on this theme of crime and see how the International Criminal Court has decided to start policy on environmental crimes. But before we get into all this great news feature, let's talk some safety. For this week in safety, we're heading to OSHA, but you guessed it. It's going to be a hot summer. OSHA wants us thinking about it, wants us looking at the weather, wants us considering what's going on with our employees and our job sites that say stay. So the advisory committee to OSHA for health and safety has unanimously told OSHA to expedite new rules in heat policy. But while they go out to stakeholders and employers and we go through the rulemaking process, which is really done quite well, OSHA needs to continue to enforce that we need to be using the OSHA heat index, that we need to be giving our people the right education and understanding that the general duty clause 29 USC 654A subsection 1, we got to keep our people safe. And this all comes from their statement. Record-breaking temperatures across the nation have increased the risk people face on the job, especially in summer months. Every year, dozens of workers die and thousands more suffer illness related to hazardous heat exposure that sadly are most often preventable. Workers at risk of heat illness need a new rule to protect workers from heat hazards. OSHA is working aggressively to develop a new regulation that keeps workers safe from dangers of heat. This is explained by Assistant Secretary for Occupational Safety and one of our favorite people in the construction industry keeping us safe, Doug Parker. He continues with, as we move through the required regulatory process for creating these protections, OSHA will use all of its existing tools to hold employers responsible when they fail to protect workers from known hazards such as heat, including our authority to stop employers from exposing workers to conditions which pose an imminent danger. The agency continues to conduct heat-related inspections under its National Emphasis Program for Outdoor and Indoor Heat-Related Hazards, which was launched in 2022. The program inspects workplaces with the highest exposure to heat-related hazards proactively to prevent workers from suffering injury, illness, or death. Since the launch of OSHA, heat, advisory, enforcement, inspection, they have conducted nearly 5,000 federal heat-related inspections. In addition, the agency is prioritizing programmed inspections in agricultural industries that employ temporary, non-immigrant H-2A workers for seasonal labor. Now, geothermal companies, I know there's plenty of you out there that also employ seasonal workers that have a language barrier. And we need to be discussing this because as OSHA is going to state right here, these workers face unique vulnerabilities, including potential language barriers, less control over their living and working conditions, and possible lack of acclimatization, and are at high risk of hazardous heat exposure. OSHA states, by law, employers must protect workers from dangers of heat exposure and should have a proper safety and health plan in place. At a minimum, Employers should provide adequate cool water, rest, breaks, and shade or a cool rest area. Employers who are new or returning to this work. So employers were getting into this big heat stuff. We need to understand that our new employees that are now getting acclimated should be allowed time to gradually get used to working temperatures. We've talked about this so many times. Why did I talk about it again? Because in June of 2022, OSHA put an emphasis program out to stop good men getting killed in trenches. And at the time, we were at 22 fatalities. By the end of the year, we were at 40. Here's the statement. This is what they're telling us. We need to be thinking about these things. And they state workers and managers should also be trained so they can identify and help prevent heat illness themselves. We need competent people, no different than trench safety, confined spaces, falls. You know what we're going to see? We're going to see heat-related illness become part of the focus, which was 4, and then we added mental health for 5. Heat's going to be the next one on there, everybody. And then we're going to have repetitive stress injuries. Again, the statement from OSHA, no worker should have to get sick or die because their employer refused to provide water or breaks to recover from high heat, or failed to act after a worker showed signs of heat illness. It comes again from Doug Parker. Get online, go to OSHA, go to your safety people, start thinking about our water, our electrolytes, our cooling areas as these extreme temperatures continue. We've now talked about this for a month on the newscast. Why? Because the emphasis program continues to come back and slap us in the face and say, we need to do better. I don't want to hear about any drilling companies having a heat-related fatality in 2024. Let's be smart industry. For this week in the news, we're heading to LA, where the Associated Press and the Los Angeles Times broke a story about a former California water official who has pled guilty to conspiring to steal water in a deal with federal prosecutors in the state's crop-rich Central Valley. The Los Angeles Times reports last week that 78-year-old Dennis Falsacci, who used to head up the Penach Water District, entered the plea in federal court in Fresno. He also pled guilty to filing false tax returns. Falsacci was accused in a case that alleged that more than 25 million in water was stolen over 2 decades when it was siphoned from a federal irrigation canal through a secret pipe and sold to farmers in other water districts. The Penach Water District supplies irrigation for farmland in Fresno and Merced counties, much of it from the federal Delta Canal. Authorities said in the court documents that Falsacci wasn't the only one taking water, but did not specify who else was involved. They estimated that Falsacci stole less than 3.5 million in water, which is a small portion of what they initially alleged he had stolen. The case comes as California has embarked on a years-long effort to conserve water used by pressing for everyone to use groundbreaking water conservation. You know, we got to think about this. The regulations that have come out on groundwater pumping, encouraging homeowners to go to drought-friendly lawns and landscaping, to the 4 million of acre feet of water that they want to store of stormwater. And this is a wild situation because we're asking farmers to drill deeper irrigation wells or to set aside crops. And then we have a second year of massive rains where we're talking about reservoirs being the highest they've been seen in decades and allotting more water to our senior water rights users. We are on a roller coaster right now with the Western United States and what's happening with senior water rights holders to the 20 tribes that are fighting over their allotment for the Colorado River, all the way down to Mexico, which by June 26th could be in a day zero rationing scenario. These are all big deals that we need to be talking about. And as we see a federal prosecutor go after Falsacci, this is a big piece. And I want you to think about, as this case comes to head and we see statements like Lake Tahoe is expected to fill for the first time since 2019. Heck, the Nevada Water Supply Outlook states that snowpack from April 1st of this year is between 108 and 244% of the median across. That the first 5 months of 2024, the precipitation was 130%. They've stated that Lake Tahoe is at 88%, Lake Powell is at 32%, Lake Mead is at 36%. These are the highest numbers we've seen since 2017. California has stated on their drought monitors and reservoirs that their water storage is at the highest levels it's seen in over a decade. I want you to think about that. A decade back, CNN started reporting stories about water thefts and droughts. And there was a big one that released a few years ago titled "Thieves in California Are Stealing Scarce Water Amid Extreme Droughts." Came out from Marisa Colin in August of 2021. She stated 1.8 billion gallons were stolen between 2013 and 2018. 326 million gallons to an acre foot. Just under. So we're stating that 5.5 million acre feet was stolen in that 5-year period. Of course, we need to prosecute. We need to be thinking about every drop. In 2022, the Driller Newscast covered a story where sluice gates were opened in Nebraska, dumping millions of gallons of water down the Republic River, and nobody solved that crime. I know Mother Nature has given us a reprieve to these extreme droughts, but I want you again to think about the 20 tribal nations right now going at the Supreme Court, going at their allotment for the Colorado. The fact that in 2026, the allotments and the extensions that we've talked about for the Colorado River are expired, and we're supposed to have better. And the North and South Basin right now can't come up with a reasonable solution. I think the North Basin has a much better plan in place. And you got those 3 big states that are consumptors. So of course, we should be accounting for every drop necessary. This is going to lead into our feature on environmental crime. For our feature this week, we're going to talk about environmental crimes, specifically water crimes, as we've just covered one in the news, and we can see the millions of acre feet that have been taken. You can see the situations that have happened in Arizona to Navajo Nation versus the United States and Arizona and water allotment. And it is time to cover this, as I've been following this since February and watching as more pieces come out. But in February, the International Criminal Court started discussions on what it would be like to prosecute environmental crimes. The Office of the Prosecutor for the International Criminal Court, CON KC, announced a new policy initiative to advance accountability for environmental crimes. Unlike the World Court, the International Court is set to prosecute from a single individual onto corporations. Currently, the International Court is in its early comments and welcomes the discussion on how the policy and proceedings could develop. Prosecutor Khan stated, "Damages to the environment pose an existential threat to all life on the planet. For that reason, I'm firmly committed to ensuring that my offices systematically address environmental crimes in all stages of its works from preliminary examination to prosecution. God, I love this. This is exactly what we need. So this is how this works. It starts with a policy initiative with the commitment and necessary objective of prosecuting these crimes. And how we start this policy is with an initial comments phase, which will draft that policy and paper. And then next, there will be a second round of public consultation on the draft itself. So, water people out there, let's be on the lookout for a phase that is going to be the second round of consultation and comments. They will host a number of roundtable discussions to address key pillars of emerging policy with relevant counterparts from civil society, national authorities, affected communities, and private sectors. I want you to consider the implications of international criminal court stepping in to prosecute environmental crimes, specifically to the impacts of water quality, water theft, and ultimately the destruction of water systems. In 2016, the European Union networks started a study for the implementation to enforcement of environmental law. And they created a paper that came out with the goal of deeper understanding and awareness of the relevance of criminal offense on fresh water and their impact on water stress and water security for years to come. And I want you to think about from Latin America, Caracas, Venezuela, perfect place, South Africa. Look at our day zero cities. We're about to see another one happen in Mexico City right now, where they're going to go to water rationing. We've covered this on the newscast. And go ahead and look at Crimea, the Ukraine, Donbass region, and Russia. And if you don't think that's about water and control of crops and environment, you're nuts. So this is a big piece. We can come right back to North America and look at the damage we've done, the policies we have, these sovereign tribal nations who, yes, are located in the United States, but are their own nations, and how they could use the U.S. courts, or they could go outside to the International Criminal Court on these pieces. And so, as this water crimes threat assessment document was created, you can go to the International Red Cross, who have classified 7 crimes for water. They're created, and it starts with water corruption, which includes grand corruption involving political decision makers and large-scale investors, and petty corruption when people or companies are requested to pay money to have access to water or to avoid inspections and fines. Can already prosecute quite a few people over that one in International Criminal Court. Number 2 from the Red Cross, water organized crime, which involves the activity of a criminal organization that has taken control of water within a territory. Middle East, India, Afghanistan, Latin America again, Bolivia, Chile, and Peru, and the fights they've had over water. To Mexico, Rio Grande, New Mexico, Texas, Colorado Compact. This is a big piece depending on how it plays out. Number 3, water pollution, which consists in offenses of against quality of water. Number 4, water theft, which consists in the reduction of quantity of water carried out by users of a water system in order to gain an economic advantage. What do we see right now? We see a lot of AI, we see satellites, we see pieces going on that show where the best water or saturation rates or where water will not be. And I don't know how many times you've been spammed lately, drilling industry, but I'm seeing all kinds of them pop up from good, reputable companies that can prove the facts of what they're trying to use to hey, we can make it so you can pick the exact place without water witching or using what we used to use, science and logs, but economic advantage. Next one, water fraud, which consists in fiscal manipulation carried out in order to change the measure of the quantity or the quality of water and to use that for illicit gain. Next one, water terrorism, which includes terrorist attacks against water, in particular, those threatening its quality with possibly poisoning or availability, attacks against water infrastructure, and water cyber attacks. Terrorism jumps right into water cyber attacks, and it's a very big piece as we think about that, because we're seeing this right now. Now, as somebody that worked for municipal water and I start thinking about rural water systems, we got a long way to go from poisoning to just pumping and dumping a bunch of water downriver. So cyber attacks include intrusion into a communication system of water management companies and the manipulation of their information or networks. Water crimes, environmental crimes by the International Court. It's life. It leads to genocide. It leads to destruction of crops, which leads to people needing to move away from their home. We got extreme weather. We got greenhouse gases into the atmosphere. We have lots of different directions this can go. We can't make a utopia, but we can hold people accountable. And that's where we're going with this. Next week, we're going to talk about the apportionments of the North Basin and South Basin of the Colorado River and what we're seeing there with water law and what the future looks like, what the tribes are expecting, the recent letter they just released at the end of April. There's plenty of ways this plays out, but the fact that the international courts has started the policy making and is open to discussion, we should all be very well aware of. Thank you for joining us for episode 112 of the Driller Newscast. Go check out thedriller.com. Check out the great topics that are on there right now, from business marketing to better business to safety and solids control to leadership. Lots going on in our industry that we need to be well aware of. And we shifted this week back to water from geothermal and construction. Still looking for great discussions and stories on the federal infrastructure bill and those construction projects. But at the same time, man, I feel like you construction drillers, you hold back. Maybe it's an NDA. Maybe you can't talk about it until the job's done. Don't know, but we'd love to hear from you. As a drilling company, as an environmental steward, as an individual that can impact what's happening in our local water system to global water, I want you to think about your drilling and construction practices, waste removal, all the ways we impact the environment, all the ways we are responsible for plugging those wells, abandoning those oil and gas wells, every piece that we're working on right now. I want you to think in the back of your head, no different than when we let that individual jump down into that trench that doesn't have a trench box and it's beyond 5 feet, and the countermeasures aren't in place and it collapses and kills them. And the competent person, the leadership, the supervisor, the owner end up in criminal court over that fatality. I want you to think about the implications of us not operating responsibly with the environment and what the international courts could possibly move to. It's a little dark for 6 months into the year. It's something we always need to be thinking about and we need to be the best drilling professionals possible. Go out and be safe.